Italian authorities interrogated Kaiser Adolf Hitler the Hohenzollern for around 18 months, the overwhelming majority of it filmed with cameras and recorded on listening devices, including hidden in his quarters outside of the usual interrogation procedure. They watch and listen to footage and audio of him being interrogated in Italy between late 1959 after his escape and taking diplomatic asylum in August 1961, constantly there. Someone is watching or listening to snippets seemingly 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Bits of it have ended up on all sorts of media. As an example, if my great-grandfather's voice was used in the audio for a horror movie, like hypothetically Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho, it usually caused more people to watch because they, at least subconsciously, recognized his voice. His real personality and reputation pulled more people than usual in, subconsciously. Then they had to watch whatever else was there, knowing he was really awesome but unsure of why the voice in the film was familiar, like the horror incidents in the movie, whilst waiting to see if anything else was included of him to the end, like more of his voice. It is just a hypothetical example. The types who included the snippets preferred to add bits of him to horror or evil-themed things to mess with people's minds who had seen or heard horrendous fake history about him. Anyone can imagine what the Italians did if they have read this far. They insisted on trying to get recognition from him of a female, as if he had sex with one or at least dated. That got the repeated reply, "I'm homosexual, everyone knows that." It was the first time he ever heard the name Eva Braun as well. Some of them may have been waiting for a mention of Sadie Einstein, as if his time as a prisoner of war in Yugoslavia, with her living on the other side of the bars in a spinster's apartment setup, had become engagement time to him. The Kaiser's replies to pointed questions early in his interrogation were blunt, honest, and almost impossible to take in some circumstances, depending on who was sitting in on the interviews, for their own lunatic reasons. Italians can seem to have their eyes rolled back in the head caused by going too far with the future fantasy more than others, even if it is a little unfair to stereotype them. Some of them sat there thinking Sadie Einstein's inbred fake Kaiser to be baby was born successfully and waited for him to mention it as if it grew up on the other side of the bars and was around 14. To be horrendously blunt, it turned to basic denial torture of him early on in the process, including solitary confinement. They have hours of audio of him yelling from a solitary confinement cell, "I'm Kaiser Adolf Hitler the Hohenzollern, and I've been held prisoner of war in Yugoslavia." It has been heard by tens of millions at least, included on all sorts of media. They, like all people aware of types with particular preferred outcomes, just kept asking repetitive questions every day, waiting for something more like what they wanted to hear in reply. They got the blunt truth, no matter what they asked or were waiting for. He was 54 when he was abducted, and 70 when he escaped. It took him a while to accept he had just turned 70. He lost count of the years when held prisoner illegally. He thought he was still in his 60s, by his best count. Having said that, Kaiser Adolf was extremely physically fit and very muscular. Things eventually settled down to the type of daily police-style interviews people see on the news or crime shows now. He found the repetitive questioning boring. It ended up a robotic-like opening answer each day with a bored yawn. Him repeating the words, "I am Kaiser Adolf Hitler the Hohenzollern, and I have been held prisoner in Yugoslavia since December 1943, when he was asked who he was every morning. He was not fully aware it was like candid camera, and they talked to him as if he had seen plenty of fake history about him on television whilst in jail. When he escaped in late 1959, he had never seen the front of one. The commercially available television did not exist when he was abducted. It was so boring that he ended up developing a procedure for lengthy interrogations, which is why they are like they are today. A clock like chess, break times, designated meal and coffee breaks, designated timing for changing the security guards, better camera position, microphone testing, that sort of thing. Just to relieve the boredom with the "you could be doing this better." When word got out he was in Italy, some people asked if he had been dropped at the Italian border, and did he have a female called Sadie and a 14-year-old child with him. As if he had finally agreed to be dragged back to Berlin for the torture extortion plan in exchange for a bath and to get out of the jail. As if the self-aborted in April 1944 inbred extortion plot brat had grown up on the other side of the bars, waiting for him to agree to be dragged back to Berlin, to make it appear he was cooperating. People even asked, how many fingers has it got, knowing it was illegally inbred without his consent when conceived in early 1944. Gossiping about the deceased fetus was also a simple way to avoid discussing who was really to blame for what he was faked being responsible for, and what was done to him. In the end he took a very casual sexual shine to a young gay security guard in his 20s and spent days trying to chat him up during the boring interrogations. Partially as a self-affirmation of his homosexuality. Painstakingly making him aware that it had been over 15 years and he knew what would probably happen if they actually had sex. The man in question is a creep, by the way. But it did happen. Some people are still insisting on pretending he did not get released before his escape in 1959 because he was refusing to agree to end the torture whilst watching the baby grow up on the other side of the bars. There was no baby. Only a miscarried fetus, April 1944. I already mentioned that Sadie Einstein self-aborted the baby sitting at a table outside his cage cell when they had been left alone together for a few hours. She used a knitting needle and sat just out of reach of him through the bars. She made noises because of the physical pain distress she caused herself using the implement to abort the child in front of him. But people still impersonate her yelling as if puzzled as to the gist of it. It is fairly simple. She was also trying to get him to yell and scream hysterically as if the child being aborted in front of him was his only chance for an heir and successor. As if he would scream and ask her to stop, even lunge at her through the bars and reach out to try to stop her, with her almost in fingertip reach, but not close enough. She was telling him how to yell, providing example noises, and waiting for him to join in and play along, even beg her not to do it. The concept that it was his only chance for an heir and successor was already incorrect, but only a future possibility he was not fully aware of, me in the end. In the end, he was clean. The Italians had nothing on him worth heading to charges or a trial for. A visit to a court or a war crimes tribunal would have been a public disaster for the lunatics who falsified the history and actually committed the crimes, and they genuinely had nothing on him. He would have been exonerated of absolutely everything they would have had to attempt to charge him with to get him to a war crime hearing in the first place. He never so much as had a parking ticket in his life, metaphorically speaking. In the end, they offered him diplomatic asylum and a new name to use, Wolfgang Alfonse. Kaiser Adolf Hitler the Hohenzollern signed an agreement to take diplomatic asylum and become a citizen of Italy on the 12th of August, 1961. Both countries called Germany were informed he took the deal and signed the agreement. The following morning, the East German army arrived in Berlin before dawn and started building what became the Berlin Wall on the 13th August 1961. If you are wondering what the motive for it going up was, now you know. The Kaiser and former Chancellor of both Germanies, before they split, took diplomatic asylum in Italy the day before, is why.